Hi guys, welcome to the video and welcome to my look at the Moza AB9 force feedback base. Now what we're going to do in the video is obviously we'll have a look at the website, we'll have a look at some of the bits of the software, we'll have a look at the hardware, we'll take it for a flight and we'll see what we think. And we're actually going to take it for a flight in 3 sims, so Microsoft Flight Simulator, X-Plane and DCS. And they have, I wouldn't say they have vastly different experiences as a result of them with regards to this base, so it's going to be an interesting element for it. But I want to just lay some foundations for the video before going any further, because there's a few things that I think we need to be aware of. Now, force feedback is an emerging thing, the same as a few years ago VR was the emerging thing, and we have these things every now and again where something that's a good idea a couple of decades ago all of a sudden comes onto the market and all of a sudden becomes something that people are aware of. And when I say all of a sudden comes to market, it's an awareness rather than anything. So force feedback's been around for a long time. It's just that the awareness has been that it's become more viable for most people. It's become more affordable. It's more within reach. And so that changes a lot of things for a lot of people. Now, I don't like the words like study level, etc. So I'm going to be guarded with terminology, because I think it's important not to mislead with things like this. This is, if I say a particular drink is amazing and it costs £3, and you go, actually I hate it, well, whoopie-doo, it's £3. It's not the biggest be all and end all. But all of a sudden, once we start talking about hundreds of pounds, it becomes a different world. If you then get into thousands of pounds, it's people's money and it's people's hard-earned cash, and for some people £100 is the limit, for other people £1,000 is the limit, and other people will just have vast amounts of money. On the flip side, some people won't have money and they'll just build everything themselves, and that is an amazing achievement, something that I can't do. So those with full sim pits where they've dedicated years of their lives to building this stuff, amazing, absolutely amazing. But coming back to the case in point, I'm very mindful that, in fact, I'll show you my workspace before we go any further. It's probably the best thing to do to explain this point. I think most people will be familiar with this sort of, or a lot of people, I should say, will be familiar with this sort of work environment. I don't have a lot of real estate for my stuff. Now, I've been collecting stuff for computing for, well, put it into perspective, that's an Atari STE with a 1 meg upgrade circa 1980 something. That's an Atari 800 XL from even before that, 8-bit. I do like my vintage stuff, and I remember a lot of it from when I was young. And so I've been involved in flight simulation for decades, and this is my working environment. It's small, it's not fancy, it's a real mix of stuff because I've bought stuff as and when I could afford it, which I think is what a vast majority of people do. Got some of my real world flying stuff here, a couple of old vintage things, so Flight Sim 2002 I think it is over there, Microsoft Flight Sim 98 something down there. So yeah, but I digress slightly. The reality is that we have a lot of things where there are restrictions placed upon us, either by the space available to us or the money we have or whatever it might be. We have all sorts of constraints, and I want to bring that as part of the video rather than just going, isn't this amazing, this is the price. I think we need to be honest and open about warts and all with this sort of thing, including prices. What we're going to do here is we're going to have a look at the software, we're going to have a look at the web page, the software, the hardware, take it for a flight in 3 different sims and see what we think from there. Now, the thing I'm going to highlight at this point is reality. I'm very cautious. I try and stay away from things like study level as phrases now, and things like that, because even the experience of flying a 152 or a 172 cannot be replicated on a desk. It's physically impossible. let alone flying a high-tech modern fighter like the F-16. Now we can get some really good stuff in terms of systems accuracies for certain aircraft. So say the PMDG 737, amazing system fidelity there, high fidelity aspects. But when we get to the physical elements, the constraints, so I've got a Warthog throttle. If I'm flying an F-16, it's completely inappropriate. I've got a Warthog F-16 stick top. If I'm flying that, that's great. But if I'm flying a Cessna 152, it's utterly irrelevant to it. And I think we have to be very careful with looking at the language and our behaviour, particularly if you're demonstrating. So I'm demonstrating this. Particularly not going, oh, this is amazing, this is earth-shattering, this is the next great thing, etc. Because we have to be mindful of the fact that we're open and honest about these sorts of things, because they cost money, and they cost a lot of money. Now, looking at the web page, as you can see, Moza, they've gone into a yoke as well now. So when I initially invested some money, they didn't do the yoke base and they didn't do the yoke. The reality is, for me, is that because I fly aircraft that are stick aircraft and yoke aircraft, it makes more sense to me for fighter aircraft to have a stick. And in terms of the stick, let me just call it up again. In terms of the stick, the top of the stick is my old stick top from my Warthog joystick. But looking at the website, as I say, they've gone into doing a yoke as well. But for me, I think the joystick is the more useful thing because I can do multiple different things with it. Whereas with the yoke, it's not so easy to do your sort of fighter stuff with that. Now, I'm going to mention money. Let's just where are we going? Let's click onto this. As I say, I like the look of their products and their product lineup. It looks very sensible to me, but cost is a significant player in this. So the lowest you can get is, for me, is just the force feedback base if you've got a compatible joystick top. And there's a list on the website somewhere in terms of the compatible stick tops. Fortunately for me, I already had a Warthog base and stick, so I can just transfer that across, which meant that all I had to pay for was £550 plus some sort of fixing solution, which ended up being the desk mount for £50 down here. So total investment of £600 plus post and packing. Now, there are competitors on the market. So this is the Brunner. They've been doing force feedback for considerably longer in terms of aviation. I don't know how long Moza's been going for with regards to driving. It's a company that's completely new to me. But I know Brunner, I've looked into it years and years ago, and I was just like, oh my God, how much is that? And I don't dispute the quality of their products because I've not tested anything of them. I've not had any of their stuff. I can't comment on any of the stuff. The only thing I can comment is whether I can afford their products or not, and I cannot, which is a shame. It looks nice. And then there's the VP Rhino, which has come out as well. How much is this one? This is €800 plus VAT, so in the UK that's 20%. So you're looking at just under €1,000 plus your post and packing. And if I'm honest, it's not the prettiest thing, is it? But again, this is where we come down to money. Sadly, it drives the world and it constrains our flight simming greatly and our aspirations. The force feedback element compared to, say, a Microsoft Flight Simulator a Microsoft Sidewinder force feedback stick from 20 odd years ago, the forces that these things start to impart are considerable. So you need a solid mounting place, desk, whatever it might be. And the units that drive them now are big. This is a big old beast. It's a solid piece of metal. Mounting it is not necessarily the easiest thing, and if I have a look under here, if I can show you guys, you can see that the metal rails that are under my desk, not all desks are great for these things, so I've kind of ended up with them sort of, I've had to mount it here because there's a metal cross piece for the desk and I can clamp it to that, and even then only one of the two clamp particularly well. I've got a lot of light coming through there. So again, you know, these things are sent to triers and to testers, and it's worth bearing in mind that not everything will automatically fit everything, and be aware of your constraints. So I've had to mount it as such. I might end up drilling through the top of the desktop to put some screws in or some bolts in just to fix it more securely. But it's pretty okay for my purposes. It's just one of those observations that I would make. But as I say, you know, the website gives you a certain amount of information, gives you some nice pictures. I will say it's a very handsome unit. Very, very handsome unit. Now, as I say, this was bought with my own cold hard cash, so I'm at liberty to say whatever the heck I want, and I will do that. As you guys know, those who follow the channel know that I give impartial thoughts and impressions in terms of things. As I say, I'm not tied to anything, and I paid my whole own hard-earned cash for this. Now, force feedback obviously is, I wouldn't say it's an emerging market because it's always been there. We had the Sidewinder from Microsoft many years ago, but it kind of went into the doldrums. Then it started to come back in a very expensive format, and then we got this, which is not cheap, but it's also nowhere near as expensive as some of the rivals. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at the bits. Now, I didn't do an unboxing because at the end of the day, it's a box. It comes in a box. The only thing I will say is regarding these bits here. So these plastic corners come with it in terms of the packing, and they actually put them on the box like so within the box, so even your box gets protection, which I thought was epic, to be honest. Not come across that before, but the standard of packing even to get to this stage was pretty good. As I say, I don't really do unboxing because that's not my bag, baby. So obviously, being a desk pilot as opposed to having my own complete rig, I need to get one of these, which is the desk clamp. It's an additional cost. It wasn't expensive in terms of the price of the whole rig, but it is something worth considering. Also, you're going to need a really good desk to take the weight. And one of the things I will mention, if I tip this over, hopefully without destroying our table, because it does weigh a lot, is the clamp itself. Obviously, you can see you tighten it up, so you put it over your desk is here, put it over your desk, tighten it up. The problem I've got, and I'll show you later on, is I've got like a rail here in the desk and it clips halfway over the clamp, so like that. So in terms of applying full force, it becomes difficult for me. So I'm going to have to figure out a way of setting up the bottom of my desk so that this sits flat, if that makes sense. Now that's a me thing, that may not apply to your desk, it's very specific to my desk, but obviously it's something to be aware of as you look at the product. And what I'll do is I'll show you it once it's in situ, but this is a very substantial mount. Now my only problem is that this weighs an awful lot. So in terms of the moment, the sort of turning effect, once this is on the desk, there's nothing on this support because obviously it's just a flat platform here. That means that almost you get a pivot point here. Now that means that it won't pivot that way because you've got a flat desk, but there is the risk of it pivoting that way. And if you imagine a flat desk, I'll show you later on, but if you imagine I've got a flat desk there like that, the pivot point is about here, so the weight is trying to turn it that way, which means that my desk is going to go like that. So my concern is the downward pressure on this, and what we'll see is with the mounting solution how it works, because that for me is potentially a weakness for my circumstances. It won't apply to everyone, and if you can bolt this substantially onto a rig or some such, then you're going to be absolutely fine. There are two ways of mounting this. You can either mount it on the side or you can mount it on the bottom so you can desk mount it. The problem is that if you do that, oh dear, you can see it's already very high. So if you imagine desk, this, then the stick on top, it's going to be a very high unit. So what I'll do is I'll get this all bolted up and we'll see how we get on. Now in terms of this unit here, if I come around here, you can see the mountings in here. So there's a couple of Allen bolts either side, here and here. If you loosen those, it allows it to slide up and down, so it is height adjustable. And then on the back we've got the various ports here and an on-off power button. Which brings me to the other things included. there's a bag of tools and nuts and bolts. Comes with each bit. So there's a bag of this comes with the actual stick, or the base I should say, and there's a bag of these comes with the mounting base. So I've got 2 sets basically. I'd rather have more than not enough. And then in addition you get the power pack, the power lead for the power pack, and your USB connection. And that's it. So that's all the hardware bit. The only other thing you get is a sheet of stickers and an instruction book. And what I would say is, in terms of the flight base clamp, the instructions on the back are really, really small. So I ended up taking a photograph and expanding it, but it's not the easiest thing to do in terms of figuring it all out. The bit that was a difficulty is the silver bits in here that allow it to slide up and down, getting it the right orientation. However, when you build it and put it together, it becomes immediately apparent if you've got it in the wrong orientation. The only thing that's awkward with it is just the sheer weight of this thing. It's huge. It's very, very strong in terms of its build. But as I say, what I'll do is I'll put it on the desk. I'll show you my mounting solution as I get it figured out, and then we can have a play and see what we think. Okay, so here's the Moza software. This is their desktop, and we'll have a very quick tour. It's fairly self-explanatory. It goes through your devices. If you don't have it connected, it obviously shows disconnected. If you have it connected, it shows the firmware, but it won't do that for my Thrustmaster stick top, because obviously it's not an MH16. However, we'll mention that in a bit. The games you have available for it and configured are on the right hand side, although I don't have this space one. Not sure what it is. Star Citizen, is it? I do have IL2, but it's not installed at the moment, and I do have all of the others installed. Yes, I even have FSX installed. In terms of configuration, it's relatively straightforward. I say relatively straightforward. DCS, I had an issue because the firmware needed updating, and I couldn't get it to update the firmware. There is a page on there hidden away in some of their FAQs that I managed to find. I'll try and find it again and drop a link into it in the description. And then on the left hand side you've got, if you like, your actual menu. Down at the bottom you've got settings. I haven't really played with these at all. You've also got this, which is your downloading your firmware, and this is where you go for your firmware to download it. So you go up to Firmware Manager. It gives you the opportunity to go and do that through that. Then you've got your various profiles. We'll discuss profiles in a bit. At the top we've obviously got the home menu, and then we've got the stick, so the grip. I should really call it grip as opposed to a stick. Now, as I say, I don't have the Moza stick. I have the Warthog one, grip. The problem is, I therefore thought, oh, this doesn't apply to me. Well, yes, it does, because you've got this cogging torque calibration down here. I'm not going to do it now because it takes a couple of minutes, but basically this will calibrate the cogging system within the stick. What was happening to me was that the stick was it was always just leaning forward, and even when I calibrated, it would calibrate fine and then it would lean forward, and it's because the cogging hadn't been calibrated. So this is an important step when you set everything up. Don't skip it, even if you don't have the same stick top, the grip. Here's your basic page. One of the things I would say at this point is, when you first load in, this is the page that comes up as basic settings for basically nothing at all. I read somewhere, and I can't remember the original source, but it was either read it or I saw it in a video, that basically this, if you like, if you consider this your default setup before you start playing with anything, anything you change, there's no button to reset everything to default. So the tip that was there was to, as soon as you get to this page, go up to preset and then click save as, and save it, give it a name and then save it. And then what you can end up with is it will save as a preset. So you can change all of the information here absolutely fine. You've got the basic settings obviously there. Something I'll draw your attention to is these three here. Direct input, telemetry force feedback, and integrated force feedback. This is my super simple way that I think of it. Basic input is that direct input is the fact that the stick is designed to be able to use force feedback from the outset. So as soon as it's talking to the computer, it starts saying, hey, you've got a force feedback stick. Yeah, you need to make it do this. You need to make it do that. And so only certain add-ons or certain programs will work with that, i.e. it's aware that it is able to provide information specifically in relation to force feedback. Telemetry is where, if you like, the program, the software, the game, whatever it might be, has no idea about telemetry. It's just sat there going, yeah, I don't know what force feedback is, but I'm throwing out the telemetry anyway because somebody might make use of this. And in effect, what happens then is the stick goes, look at all this lovely telemetry. We'll suck all that up and we'll do something with it. So in effect, this is where, imagine you've got an aircraft in a game. The aircraft is sat there going, yeah, lovely. I've got a force feedback stick attached to me, in which case, stick, do X, Y, and Z. And stick goes, oh yeah, thanks for that. I'll do X, Y, and Z. Telemetry is where I have no idea what's going on, and the software for Moza picks up on that and goes, I'm not receiving anything. So what I'll do is I'll go digging into the game, and I'll pull out the telemetry that I need to make the stick work. And then finally, integrated is imagine a situation. Well, it's not imagine. This is a situation where it uses both. So if it has the direct input from the game, aircraft, whatever, it will use that, added to any telemetry it needs to add to that. You'll see the difference between, say, for example, we'll have a look in DCS with a couple of the aircraft there, and we'll have a look in Microsoft Flight Simulator, etc. So that's that page, but those are really three things to be aware of. Expert settings is where you can set dead zones, etc. Dynamic force feedback. MCLS is the software that Moza have generated. I don't really understand a lot of it, but it's their self-generated software in terms of utilizing some of the force feedback elements. You can turn it on and off, but as you can see, it only really it's their sort of proprietary force feedback system for just generic use, although I think some aircraft do use it, but that's aircraft dependent. Telemetry force feedback, this is all of the force feedback, and you'll see that there's different categories here. So if I open all of these out, you'll see that it's got general aircraft effects. So for example, G-force applies to all aircraft regardless. You can tailor all of these individually. You can change the values, the curves, you can add them, get rid of them. So ground vibration, you can get rid of ground vibration, for example, just turn it off and then turn it on. So there's a lot of stuff in here that people far smarter than me can work out in terms of recreating the behavior in terms of force feedback for particular aircraft. Then you've got specific ones depending on what type of aircraft it is. So you've got propeller effects, jet effects, and helicopter effects. Now realistically, you're only going to need to use one of these. So if you like, you're going to have that plus one of these. Now all of this sounds very, very complicated, and to be fair, if you're a simpleton like me, there's a lot of this stuff you don't really want to be doing. So some clever people have produced these, which are presets. Now I'm just going to bring up the stick again, because the presets, there's two elements of the presets that I'm going to highlight. So we're all familiar with spring centering sticks. There's a couple of, we can add sort of things to make it feel or act or behave a bit better or a bit more like certain aircraft. You know, and we can have tails that droop when, you know, there's no airflow going over them, all that good stuff. But I think there's two critical elements, I think, where force feedback starts to play into this. The first is helicopters, and the second is pressure sensing as opposed to travel. So with a normal joystick, so this hasn't got any presets on it at the moment. With a normal joystick, you have your full and free movement, and it's always spring centers back to the middle. That is great for a couple of things, but it's not great for everything. So most aircraft, you know, are great. In fact, a spring centering joystick is probably the most accurate representation of an Airbus A320, for example. But for most general aviation, etc., it's not appropriate. So we're going to mention a couple of things. The first is that helicopters controls are completely different to fixed wing. They have no feedback from control surfaces. So as a result, if you're in your 172 and you fly along, there's aerodynamic forces. So if you pull on the elevator, there'll be an aerodynamic force that will resist that, push back through the controls, and it will push against you. Once you trim it out, that force goes away. Now that's an important thing that can't be replicated in a center spring sort of joystick, but it can be replicated on something like this. Then there's also helicopters. Helicopters don't have any aerodynamic feedback like say a Cessna 172 would. So fundamentally their controls are completely different, and because they have no feedback, it means they have stability augmentation systems put in to kind of counteract that, to give the pilot something to work with. But what it means is it works in a different way. So we'll have a look at that when we have a look at a helicopter, probably a DCS helicopter more than anything else. But we will have a look at that because it is fundamentally different how they work. And those two things between them, for me, are critical to making an immersive element for a particular aircraft. So let's load up one of them where it's this is a fun one for me, and we'll call up the Viper. So those who know the Viper know that as an F-16, the stick doesn't really move. Now it does have tiny amount of movement, a small amount of movement. It won't stay completely centered in the real thing either, but it's more pressure sensitive. So you don't see them moving the stick all like this, but you'll see them applying a force, or you'll be aware that they're applying a force. So if I select Viper, you can see the things now bolt upright. And I'll go back to this screen and we'll go to basic settings, and you'll see it's changed a lot now. So this is just telemetry. It's not using direct input, it's just using telemetry at the moment. That's because it's not connected to the sim. However, you'll notice here that what we've got is a green dot, which is how much force I am applying, and an amber or yellow, an amber or red or pinky red dot, which is how much force it is pushing against me. And then obviously you'll be able to visually see the displacement off center, and there's not really much at all, but you can see that I can control the green dot by basically applying pressure. The stick itself is not really moving much, and even if I apply a lot of pressure, it's still not moving very much at all. The displacement of the stick itself, the physical movement, is very low, but you can see the force is right up towards the limit of where it can get to. If you remember, I mentioned numbers in terms of force. I have no idea what amount of force I'm pressing on there, but it's certainly substantial. However, I can break through it. There we go, and you'll see that I've gone beyond. I'm not getting any more signal, but I am getting a lot of resistance there, and then it goes back into its central position. But I can still fly it with fingertips. Look, I can still adjust things, you know, with huge amounts of accuracy. It's just that the actual movement is pressure sensitive. That's how an F-16 stick works. I think this is awesome. We'll have a look at it in the sim. And then, as I say, the other one that's significant for me is a helicopter. What we'll do is we'll actually go to a different thing. Oh, and you can obviously filter these. Where's it gone? Microsoft Flight Simulator. And we'll choose the Bell 407. And I think I've just given you a little preview of something I'm going to talk about as well. So Bell 407 up here, you'll see obviously with the stick being a helicopter, I've mentioned the fact that it doesn't self-center its controls because it's got no feedback through the hydraulics. So when you move a stick, it just stays there. You cannot do that with a spring-centered stick. You just can't. And this then brings another thing. If you are like me and you sometimes fly one type of aircraft and then you switch to another one, helicopter specific controls are no use when you then want to revert to flying general aviation or an airline or whatever. If you fly those, a spring centered control is okay. But for helicopters, if you want to fly the genuine experience, you can't have a spring in it. You can have dampers, but you can't have a spring in it. And as you can see, that this thing, it just stays where I put it. It's got enough damping on it that it just stays there. So those are the two, if you like, categories that I would consider are significant. So let's load up a simulator and see what we think. So bearing in mind the accessibility and the usability of something is only as good as the software, we do have to raise the issue in terms of the amount of profiles. Now I'm hoping this would get better, but it really is affected by which sim you're in. So the obvious one is if you look at DCS World, loads of profiles. There's 19 total profiles on this so far on the presets, of which, as you can see, the vast majority are DCS. X-Plane 12, there's apparently none. IL2 I don't own. Star Citizen I don't own. Well, I do own IL2, I just don't use it. Microsoft Flight Simulator has only got 4 profiles. 2024's got none, but I think you can transfer them across. And as I say, it's so dependent on software that this is a bit of a disappointment. So I can't recall if I mentioned this earlier in the video, so I'll at least make mention of it now. Worst case scenario, I've already gone through this process. So just quickly going back to the idea that software is probably more important than hardware in many respects for having this thing work as we want, when we want. The key thing with that is profiles. Not just the sort of process of having them set up, but the accessibility and availability of them. So for example, if you're in DCS, out of the 19 profiles, a good 15 are DCS profiles for various mix of aircraft. If you however go to X-Plane, there are none. IL2, Star Citizen, I don't have either of those loaded, so I don't know if there are any profiles. FSX, wouldn't have expected any given the age of this sim. Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 has 4. 2024 has none, although I suspect you can use the 2020 profiles in 2024. And therein lies a bit of an issue for me. Obviously, if you're a DCS player, that's great. But the effectiveness or the accessibility, or however you wish to look at it, the actual benefit of the force feedback is really realised by having software that can utilise it in the sim that you want with the aircraft that you want. And obviously profiles becomes a limiting factor in that set of circumstances. So I just thought I'd mention that because that is for me quite a key factor. Yeah, I know there's community stuff being done, but really I think the onus should be on Moza to try and develop more profiles for the other sims beyond DCS World. Okay, so here we are in our good old Cessna 172. What I do need to do, and I shall bring this up, is I go up to Moza and I go, I'm going to ask you to use the profile of a particular aircraft. I'm going to go up here, I'm going to go Cessna 172, I'm going to go load preset. You probably heard the thud there. But having now got that, you'll see, let's just have a look, some movement on here. So I will highlight that this is the stick just moving around. You can see it just juddering around because a low RPM, stick's fully forwards because it's basically saying the tail is dropped fully down due to the effects of gravity. So we've got the tail droop, we've got vibration from the low RPM. If I increase RPMs, come on Rippums. Oh, I do need to just make sure I've got the right profile for my controls on here, don't I? Because I changed that. Control options. That'll do for today. That'll do for this one as well. Okay. Apply and save. Resume. So, where were we? Okay. So now I've got the controls set up, we can just do the following. You can see the controls usual, left, right, etc. Now they're damped, so unlike a spring one, it doesn't necessarily go doing like that. Because it's damped, there's also no spring back, so there's no bouncing around. And then because it's got the tail droop, it goes down. You'll also notice it doesn't just crash forward, it's pretty constant and steady. So already you would sit there and go, well, that's pretty good immersion. I quite like that. That's very good indeed. Thank you very much. Likewise, you'll see that when you look at the stick in the picture on the right hand side, when I increase RPMs, which is the other way, you'll see the stick will smooth out and stop bouncing around because the vibrations have changed from large slow oscillations to finer. So it's still vibrating, it's just vibrating with less amplitude but higher frequency. So it's really, it's really nice. And obviously, as I say, if we do it fast enough, I don't know if we'll get... No, it's not able to lift the tail yet, but let's get that off. Likewise, we should be able to feel some effects of things like flaps as we fly around, but let's get airborne. And let's try and not crash into things, eh? So you'll notice the stick is now starting to come back because of the airflow over the tail, which is true to life. It's accurate, we like that. 40 knots. A little bit of rumble on the strip. We'll go across the centre line, see if we get a rumble for that. No, nothing particularly there. And then we'll pull back, go into a climb. And it's nicely damped. That's the first thing I would highlight, is it's damped, so it's not... It feels stable, it feels firm, feels okay. And when it's trimmed out, it should be okay to hold an attitude, but one of the things is that it's not really using trim the same as the real aircraft would. The real aircraft, you would hold an attitude, you've obviously got pressure on the stick from holding that attitude, and you would then trim until you feel no pressure on your hand, and when you let go, the aircraft will stay where it does, stay where you've left it. But in this case, trim in this aircraft doesn't really work the same, so with that preset, it doesn't really do what it should do in terms of the profile. But in terms of hand flying, it's very nice. We get some vibration through the stick when we start to mess around with things like flaps, which is nice. We'll bring it all the way around. We'll see if we get a buffet for the stall. We should do. If we don't, I'll be very surprised. Bring the power off. Stick's starting to judder a bit because we've got low RPM. And we'll see if it stalls and what behaviour we get in terms of a stall. We'll just trim it a little bit. Shouldn't really trim into a stall or into a turn for that matter, but let's bring it back, bring it back. There's a stall warner. It's shaking anyway due to the engine RPMs. It's becoming more vigorous, and there we go. Don't get a secondary stall, but that was good. As soon as it stalled, it lost all the pressure on the stick, which was nice. So yeah, we're going to do something. I mean, with this sort of thing, you just fly unprofessionally anyway, don't you? You don't get too carried away with necessarily following real world protocol. We'll just see how well it bounces and see what the stick response is to that. So fingertips on the stick so that you can see what happens. Plow it in, bang, and down again, bang. Right, enough of that. It's okay. It's working on telemetry. It's getting sufficient data to give you some sort of feedback. That I think is okay. Next aircraft, bing. Okay, so now we have the Bell 407, and not flown this helicopter in the sim before, so let's see what happens. I'm not necessarily yeah, let's just get airborne. Whoa, 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 whoa! Okay. So the first thing I'm going to note is that does it do as a normal helicopter would do with stability augmentation, i.e. the stick stays in the same place, it doesn't spring back to centre, and that's exactly what happens. It stays in the same place. Do I think this is going to make me fly helicopters better? Possibly. because I haven't got the annoying spring trying to centre it back to the middle. Now, I've never flown this helicopter in the flight sim that I can remember, certainly. But as I say, it's got that sort of ability to stay in the middle. It does vibrate, and the vibration means that it does deviate slightly, but it's got a moderate amount of vibration. The thing is, with a helicopter, it should really be able to fly with fingertips, so let's just see how we get on at doing that. In fact, to be honest, a lot of aircraft you should really be, unless you're doing hard aircraft manoeuvres or in turbulence, for example, you should be able to fly most with your fingertips. But yeah, this is nice. This is quite pleasant. We'll try and bring it over this way a little bit. But the stick forces are very light, but the damping is quite high, and there's no centering. So it's not trying to, I'm not constantly having to hold it in a position. It's not trying to fight me to be in that position. I'll bring it over this way a little bit. Now, for someone who's got maybe 10-15 minutes in this aircraft at most, I don't think we're doing too bad, are we? As I say, I don't really fly helicopters in Flight Simulator because the controls are so off. Now, the thing is, if you do fly helicopters but you also fly fixed wing, it's difficult because either you have a self-centering stick, spring-centering stick, which is no use for helicopters, or you have no spring in it, which is no use for aircraft, but great for helicopters. But this is this enables that to take place. Let's just have a... Do we get a translational lift burble? Not really. Oh, it's nice to fly around, to be fair. Not something I've ever bothered with, but I can see myself becoming used to flying these things around. But the fact that you've got no centering spring is nice. It's nice. Oh, nice judder as we're coming around the corner there. Yeah, in fact, with no spring force, it's actually a really enjoyable experience. And I don't even fly helicopters that much in Simland. Yeah, that's nice. I like that. I have to say, it feels more natural flying a helicopter with no spring in it than it does flying one with a spring in it. I've got limited stick time in helicopters. I'd say maybe about 15 hours total, and that was spread over the period of about 15 years. But this feels quite enticing. It's a very high hover. We don't want that. Let's see if I get myself into some PIOs getting down towards the ground. Although, to be fair, I'm doing a really garbage job of getting to the ground, aren't I? Yeah, it's not the greatest, but there we go. Right. Can we just turn this off a moment? Of course, it's down here, isn't it? Right. Hoping it's not going to cause a problem. But you can see now with a stick, I can move it all the way left, right. It's got resistance, it's got heft. You can see that it doesn't just fly away from me, but it does exactly what it should do. It should sort of have that stability and the fact that it doesn't have a centering position. Right, excellent. Let's jump out of that then. Okay, so here we are in X-Plane. We're in the Robinson R66. And the first thing I'm going to look at is the stick behaviour. Does it do its thing of not self-centering. Yeah, it's not. I'm doing it quite delicately because the rotor is obviously running, but it does move around without self-centering, which is good. That's what we want to see. However, this is what we're having to do. If I go to X-Plane, down here, oh sorry, here, clear the filters, game, X-Plane, we had, what, 4 profiles in that one. We've got tons in DCS World, we've got none in 2024, but we could potentially use the profiles from 2020. I think we can. And then don't have Star Citizen, don't have IL2, do have X-Plane 12, and there's no profiles, which means we're going to have to see if profiles from other things can work now and see if it picks up on the telemetry. So let's try first. Now the thing is, X-Plane 12 is known for good aerodynamics, good modelling of aerodynamics, etc., and also good with helicopter. So I'd like to think that it can get some good telemetry out regarding the helicopter. But we can either use the DCS or the Microsoft Flight Simulator. Let's use Flight Simulator. Where's it gone? The Bell 407. Load preset. I've got this really irritating buzzing noise. Don't like that at all. Let's minimise that and see if we can utilise this. Wee. Now, in terms of basic controls, i.e., has it got a spring and does it self-center? No, it doesn't. My flying is awful with it though, but that high-pitched buzz is not great. I don't know what's causing it. See if it goes through translational lift, hopefully in line with the runway. I mean, the helicopter's obviously going to go through it, which it has, but there's no discernible impact on the vibration here. Whee! And as we continue, you can see that the vibration on the stick is becoming almost intolerable. And if I take the power off completely, and now we've got nothing at all on the stick. What on earth? Have we lost our rotator? We can't have, because we're flying. Got nothing on the stick at all. It's just like a limp thing. Weird, but we've lost all telemetry now, it would appear. How weird is that? Let me just feel the base. How warm is it? It's not at all warm. Let's just press that button there. How weird is that? So this is the 407 through Microsoft Flight Simulator. Let's try the 407 an equivalent through DCS. See what DCS gives us. Let's choose a helicopter. Hip. Don't really know. Let's go with a hip. Where's it gone? There it is. The Hippo. Load preset. Confirm. Get rid of that. And let's unpause. Wait! Oh, whoa! Now my little irritating buzzing's back. Now all the force feedback's gone. So yeah, what on earth is going on here? What is going on here? I mean, in terms of just flying it as a helicopter, I suppose it's okay. But yeah, that's a little bit worrying. Where has all my force feedback gone? It's still obviously operating as a joystick. Thank God the vibration's gone though, because that was madness. So, safe to say that helicopters are not necessarily working that well in the sim with how I've got it so far. Flight configuration. Let's go 172. 172, same place, start new flight, start new flight. See how we get on here. Yeah, that's weird. That's really weird. That whole, you've got some telemetry, now you haven't. Right, let's get a profile we can use. We'll have a go with. Well, should we have a go with the Phantom Mustang? Getting nothing through that force feedback. Let's try Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 profile. This is using the Microsoft Flight Simulator 172 profile on the X-Plane 172. You can see we've got the juddering already from low RPM. Going to increase the RPM. Smooths out. It's very high pitched but very gentle vibration now. Back down. Want to know if we get any response from flaps. So what I'll do is I'll increase that to get rid of the vibrations here with a gentle finger. No, there's no obvious change in terms of the vibration due to the flaps. Right, let's just get airborne. See what we think. And one of the things I want to do is sticks coming back. That's a win. That's a win. That's already one up on DCS. And we're getting a bouncing nose wheel which is coming back through on the sticks. We're getting feedback for that, which is nice. We're getting no feedback for the fact that we can't maintain a centre line and we're over controlling. And then we're going to just ease back. And does it move with trim? Not really, no, it's just the same as Microsoft Flight Simulator, it can't do that. Flaps. Yeah, there's no thumps or anything, but we do get that sort of high-pitched vibration. It's got a bit of heft to it. It's nice to roll left and right. Feels as if it's attached to something rather than just bouncing off a spring. It's got a certain amount of damping. That's one of the things you get with this that you don't get with a spring, is damping. So let's get ourselves a bit of altitude. Let's get slow as well, and we'll just investigate what it's like slow speed handling. In terms of, do we get any feedback for mushy controls? Yeah, it's quite mushy. It's really quite mushy. Good, that's nice. Let's get some speed up. And transfer that into some altitude. And what we'll do is we'll test it as follows. Cut the power, and at slow speed everything should be woolly. So woolly there, and woolly there. If I put the power on at slow speed, the tail, anything that's tail, should be much better. So tail is better, pitch authority is better, roll is still woolly. So that's nice. It's doing that correctly. Let's bring it round. Using too much rudder there, Ricardo. And what we'll do is we'll do the same sort of thing as we did with Microsoft Flight Simulator. We'll bring it around and just bounce it off the ground and see if we get any sort of telemetry kick in for that. Airfield's over here somewhere, isn't it? There it is. It does feel like it's more alive. And that's going to be a combination of the sim and the telemetry on a force feedback stick. I'll admit the force feedback on this is not particularly strong. Let's just trim a bit. Trim. and then we'll just drive it into the ground and see what happens. And this is the ultimate test to see if there is or is not telemetry. Right, let's have a watch of what the stick does. Typically it's going to go into ground effect and probably raise the nose a little bit, but we'll bring the power off and counteract that. Watch the stick. Bang! Oof! That broke everything. Didn't break the stick fortunately, but wow. Right. So the issue I was having with the helicopter appears to be more to do with the telemetry and or the X-Plane 12 telemetry and the Microsoft Flight Simulator sort of profile. But that highlights a huge issue in terms of sims and profiles, and the fact that you need to have them all, not just bits of it. Right, let's move on now to DCS. Okay, so one of the things we've looked at or mentioned but we haven't really looked at is we're going to use DCS now. I'm going to come down here, use DCS World. Let's find an aircraft that I actually own and that I have set up. We've had a look at the joystick behaviour with the DCS Viper, but let's have a look for something else. Tank Killer, that'll do. Let's load that then. Confirm. If we go to the main menu, DCS, launch game, and hopefully it will launch the game from there. There we go, the game's loading. I will mention this. So this was an issue for me to start with. You'll see I'm running firmware version 1.1.1.45. Originally I was running something like 1.31, I think it was, and I was getting no telemetry feedback, and it was just saying telemetry service disconnected for DCS. And so I was getting the force element for, you know, heft and difficulty with moving it, etc., but I was getting no telemetry data back for things like firing the gun, moving flaps, etc. And so I had to go into the various interwebs to find out how to update the firmware. And the firmware, as I think I mentioned the earlier in the video, is to go through this arrow here and then update the firmware via the firmware manager. So although it loads up, when it loads up it automatically checks things like firmware and software versions, etc. To actually do the firmware, I found that I had to go into the firmware manager and go through that profile. But that's just a by the by. So what have we got loaded up? DCS Tank Killer. Launch DCS. Okay, instant action. What have we got here? What did it do? What did I load up as a preset? Oh, A10 wasn't it? Yes. A10 C2 free flight. Okay, so here we are in DCS, and we've got the A10 profile loaded. And if I can remember how to load up some weapons, we'll do that. But I haven't got a clue, if I'm honest. Oh, there we go. Didn't need to worry about that. So the DCS A10, if anything was going to be using telemetry, etc., I would have thought it's going to be this. Sorry, a full-on profile. So let me just get this over. In fact, let's get that wings level. Set that, and then set that. Right, we'll just leave it doing that whilst it's messing around. So coming down here, you can see we've got our telemetry, etc. here. You can see the stick position is quite far forward, but it's maintaining it in the centre. But what I wanted to show you is this. Now that we've got the aircraft, all of a sudden the telemetry service is connected. So with DCS, unlike the others where the telemetry service was connecting to the game, this is clearly connecting to individual aircraft, which makes a huge difference. So let's have a little go with this. Oh, it's got some heft to it. Fairly strong stick forces for this. Oh, yes. Yeah, you can... Oh my god. the pull needed for that is outrageous. And then that's interesting. If you're not pulling, the stick is massive and it pulls down. If you are manoeuvring, obviously the stick's not going to pull down because you're pulling on it, but you still get the vibrations. Lovely. Got no sensation of movement for flaps. Not necessarily going to experience the sensation of movement for flaps. Let's have a go with speed brakes. No, there's no turbulence for the speed brakes. Let's have a look. Are they out? Are they even out? Yeah, they are. What about gear? Yeah, you get something for the gear moving. Nothing for the change in relation to RPMs. Okay, so going for a different aircraft now. Let's just go here and where's it gone? Where are you, my beauty? Come back to me wherever you may be. Tomcat. Let's load that profile in and see what we get here. Okay. Let's get ourselves sorted out. Hey, now this is a nice one. So, if you remember ages ago, I talked about there's different ways of implementing trim, and some will be, for example, an aerodynamic flying surface like on general aviation, but with hydraulics it's different in how they're implemented. And if I remember rightly, in a Hawk it's kind of bungees, I think, that are used to position the stick in a particular position to trim it out. But quite often what you'll have is, unlike the fixed wing aircraft of a general aviation, what this will do is it will quite often reposition the centre point of the stick. So if you like the new centre point, so if I just try and balance that out, if I press and hold this, look at the stick. Now actually, it's harder to demonstrate it nose down. We're about to stall. The aircraft will probably tell me soon. By crikey, this has got some heft to it as well in terms of its behaviour. But yeah, as I say, the trim is marvellous, because if I trim, the stick moves to that new neutral position. Fantastic. In terms of manoeuvring, you need to pull a fair bit of weight. The stick is now shaking, the airframe shaking, the two are matching each other. The F-14 is fantastic for this. Now, the first aircraft as the A-10 was pretty much ED. It's one of the key factors in the early days of ED with DCS particularly. So it was a standalone thing. You bought DCS and so on and so forth. We had DCS, and I would have expected the A-10 to have some implementation for force feedback by default of it being DCS. This is heat blur. And their implementation is fantastic. So heat blur are exceptional with a lot of their modelling and their systems and the way they model stuff. Pulling this around, if you can imagine pulling this in close combat, and you don't even need to look at the screen to see that you are on the limit of what you're doing with the aircraft. You ease off and the rumbling eases off and you pull back in, screen shakes, hear the vibrations, stick shakes again. What a win for those who enjoy their air combat, to know exactly what's happening with your aircraft. Oh, it doesn't want to go that way. Didn't want to turn right there and it was telling me. Oof. Yeah, that talks to you big time, that does. Right, let's get out of this one. So here we are in the Hind. This is the aircraft I'm just going to try and demonstrate. Now I'm awful at flying a Hind, but I'm going to try and demonstrate some of the elements of flying this aircraft, or any aircraft with this sort of hydraulic system. Just make sure we're not descending. I don't understand the instrumentation in this aircraft. I've literally never flown it. But in terms of a hydraulic system, as I said before, it has a neutral position, which it holds the position of the helicopter in. If I then trim using the trim switch, you'll see that I can change that neutral position. So this is trimming to the left. It will change attitude and then hold that attitude. If I do it to the right, it will go the opposite way and hold that attitude. I can do it, you know, quite significantly. When it's got that attitude, I still have a certain amount of control, but it will always return to that attitude that you set it to have. Just get a bit of power on here. I'll come round to the right. The same happens if I trim up and if I trim down. Now what I'd also add is that what you may or may not notice is that when I trim, let's do down, when I trim down, the stick itself moves forwards, but it's more apparent when I do it backwards. The stick moves backwards, which is exactly how it happens in the real world, which is great. You also have force trim release, which is where you press and hold the button, and that gives you full authority over the aircraft. Almost, I don't know what it does in terms of the stability augmentation. I assume it's still got some, but it means that what then happens is you can fly around holding the button as if it were normal. And then when you release the button, that becomes its new datum again. So this is where we can be quite manoeuvrable with this, although I won't be because I'm an awful pilot. I over-control this like nobody's business. This is just not an aircraft that I've learnt or spent time with at the moment. Petrov in the back clicking away on switches, I think. But I'm trying to do it in tiny movements. You'll notice my hand movements are barely moving at all with this thing. And if you start to manoeuvre it too vigorously, it will get out of you. It will escape you a little bit, shall we say. But by having that, it's almost like having a built-in autopilot, because all it's going to do is maintain the attitude. Now, if you change things like the power settings, you'll upset that. As you see, as I change these power settings, it goes up and to the left or down to the right. I'm going to try and see if I can hash a landing. So I've taken off the force trim, so I'm flying it a bit more manually. We'll bring the power right back. Bring ourselves into a decelerating attitude. Hopefully not get into VRS. The sounds in this thing is absolutely epic. Let's take the force trim off there. I need to learn to fly this thing more, don't I? This is quite awesome. Well, I'm doing a really bad job of it. That caught me out. Gear down. Over controlling. Where you need head tracking, which I haven't got set up at the minute. We're going down with VRS, we are, yes, back. Never mind. So, there we go. So let's start from the beginning. I don't normally consider websites per se, but this one gives us a lot of information. It's well presented, well laid out. It's aesthetically pleasing, which matches the unit itself. The unit itself, again, aesthetically pleasing, seems very hefty, weighs an absolute ton, made of mostly metal, and I just actually think it's a really well designed piece of kit. I've got no qualms about it. The mounting solution's fairly flexible. It didn't quite fit me, but that's a me thing rather than them, because they cannot physically accommodate 100% of desks. It's just not something they can do. So they have to come up with the best, most flexible system they can, which I think, to be fair to them, they probably have done. It just didn't fit me great. What it means is that you guys, before you go out there, you need to maybe get some measurements in terms of how it's going to fit on your desk, etc. but that's the only real downside I came across in the physicality of the machine. It was well boxed, it was well packaged, it looked very professional, and so from that aspect, if you like, the physical unit itself, the handling, the appearance, the aesthetics, the boxing, the packaging, all pretty good. Really had I didn't have any real complaints at all, if I'm brutally honest. The only thing that was a complaint is the instructions, and the instructions on the website don't get much better. So the instruction manual that you see here, this one here, where are we going? Here. The instruction manual you see here, that's basically the same as the one on the internet. So it's not really that much use. But there is help available online, as is the case with most things these days. As I say, put it into context, the next best price-wise is the VP Force Rhino, which I've heard good things about. I just can't afford it. And then the CLE Mark II joystick base looks very similar aesthetically. But again, that's even more expensive. And so one of the things for me, and I said it from the outset, is one of the ceilings, or one of the factors that restricts people, is going to be the price of something. And so this is, if you like, at the bottom end of the priciness for this technology. And even at the bottom end, it's a considerable investment to think, do I, don't I? Is it worth it? Is it not? Now, we'll have a look at the actual software. The software is the heart of this thing, really, and it's the bit that it both wins at and fails at. So this is where it comes for me in as an important point. The variety of desks, controls, PCs, keyboards, third-party hardware, add-ons, sims, there's so many things that become variables in this thing that realistically there is no way on this earth that you can turn around and say that without a subject matter expert mimicking the exact controls with the exact weights, with the exact dimensions, spacings apart, etc., that we can turn around and say, oh, it's realistic, or oh, it's study level. For me, that's just not the case. What I can say is whether or not it brings in an additional level of immersion. I'm gonna do it with a number of the negatives and then the positives. Other negatives that come along are things like no profiles for a sim that they say is supported. I find that very bizarre, particularly given the fact that X-Plane 12 gives out a lot of telemetry. It does do it, and you know, it's an aircraft. It's a flight sim that prides itself on the aerodynamics and how the system works with the blade element theory and so on and so forth. This is crying out for force feedback support. Now, I don't know why there's nothing for it, but you know, that's how we are at the minute. Microsoft Flight Simulator has some support. The two biggest winners for it are general aviation. That seems to be working pretty well, and helicopters. Helicopters are a big deal because the way that controls in helicopters work to fixed wing aircraft is fundamentally different. Will you get much benefit on, say, doing a 737? I think you could. You know, if you imagine 737s when the gear goes down, big thunk, flap movement changes, there's lots of elements in flight simulation where you could get something out, say, of 737 that would be of value. In terms of the feedback, you know, obviously you get the obvious ones are things like, you know, when the gear comes up and down and when you hit the tarmac and so on and so forth. But it's just a bit disappointing because the controls of the A320 are not really the most, you know, you don't trim it and have a new control position, it just springs back. This is the most similar to a spring centering joystick that there is. Yet this is one of the profiles which I find unfortunate. Don't mind it, but I would like something, you know, like a CRJ 737, 7777, something of that nature where it's got a control system that doesn't have a spring centering or a centering control system. So yeah, that's ish. And then you go up in terms of, once you get to DCS World, it's far improved in terms of how much information it draws from the simulator, the profile availability, the variances, the differences between, say, the Viper, where it becomes a bit like a brick, you know, with the force feedback being something where you can't move the stick, to helicopters like the Hippo, where as soon as you do that, the stick stays wherever you put it. I mean, that's great. And so the software makes a huge difference, but it also highlights where it's good and bad with particular sims, and I think that's an important element of it. And that brings me onto the flying characteristics, really. Using it, so the kindest thing you can say in a lot of cases is that it just felt right. It felt right to have resistance. It felt right to have resistance that was damped as opposed to just pinging you back to the middle. It felt right to have something where it didn't do that and oscillate around a center point. It felt right to have differing amounts of pressure required for different aircraft for different speeds. It felt right to have some sort of response to juddering. And I remember specifically when I was doing aerobatics in the Hawk, you pulled until you were nibbling the buffet, the phrase that my instructors were using. You know, you pull for your until you're nibbling the buffet, and then you just hold it there. And that's not just about visibility, that's about feel. Feel of the airframe, feel of the stick, feel of everything. And that's something that within the framework of the sim, only force feedback can give you that. So we can kind of distill all of that bit we've just been talking about down into a few features or a few key elements. Up until the intervention of force feedback, there wasn't a great deal of choice within budget for most people to accurately replicate some form. And I'm not saying accurately replicate a particular aircraft, but accurately replicate the way controls behave for helicopters, i.e. force trim, the fact that they don't necessarily have any centering at all, but unlike taking the spring out at the bottom of the base, it's damped, it stays where it's put, it doesn't just fall. If you took the spring out at the bottom of the base, all of a sudden you'd have to put some sort of a damping mechanism on it so it stayed put, which this does with certain aircraft and certain software. So anyone who flies helicopters, for me, this is beneficial, because it removes that centering spring joystick palaver that's nothing to do with flying a helicopter. Anyone who flies GA, there are benefits to it in as much as it does replicate some of the things that you go through in terms of GA, particularly with, you know, stuff like the tail drop and the vibrations and the controls moving. If you fly an Airbus A320, for me, you don't gain much. You gain a very expensive, well damped spring centering joystick is the best way I can describe it. And so this is where it's difficult. I could come up with 20, 30 different aircraft or instances where this would work or wouldn't work. And if you imagine the combination between sims, types of aircraft, environment you want to fly in, other add-ons, other peripherals you have, once you add in all of these things, it's very difficult to say it's great for everything or great for nothing or great for this or great for that, because there are so many variables. So my aim with the video was to demonstrate the whole thing rather than to sit there and go through you know, this is world shattering, it's great, it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Those statements only apply if it is going to deliver what you want. So if all you do is fly Airbus A320s across the pond on autopilot, this isn't going to deliver you any benefits whatsoever that are worth the money you're going to invest in it. If, however, you dogfight in F-16s and you want a stick that doesn't move in your hand, that gives you tactile feedback on DCS, this is a very different proposition to what's there. If you fly helicopters, it's a very different proposition to what's out there. And if you are on a budget, it's an expensive thing for the bottom end. So that's the thing, you can't really come to a conclusion, and I know there's other videos out there where it's you know, next level, or this is amazing, or this is essential, or whatever. It's not essential. The only thing that's essential really is to have a computer that can run the simulation, and then everything above that is a next step. So the next step would be having a stick and a throttle combination. The next step would be making sure it's HOTAS. The next step would be making sure it's a high quality one, for example. There's nothing essential about this stick. There's nothing essential about any force feedback. There's nothing essential about VR. You know, the sort of hype that goes around new things for me can be misleading. It can be bewildering. There can be a lot of stuff. This is not going to be for everyone. There's no product out there that is for everyone. That's a fact. So I hope that you guys have pulled something from the video that will benefit you. The biggest takeaway from me is that since I've had it, I have not gone back to any other joysticks. Even despite its flaws, even as a basic joystick, it's a decent joystick. You know, the fact that it's just damped, it's got heft to it, it's got weight, it's a bit more realistic than having a spring centering base. No matter how good quality it is, it doesn't match the feel of this. So for me, that's my takeaway personally, is that do I go back to having a spring centering stick? No, not at all. Not at all. Do I regret buying it? No, not at all. Do I regret some of its limitations? Yes, because those limitations are tangible and affect me, particularly X-Plane 12. And if anybody knows any way round or to make that experience better, that would be great. But because I fly various sims, and I'm not just tied to one sim, and I'm not just tied to, say, warbirds or civilian or airliners or whatever, you know, it becomes less of an issue. But yeah, if you're a DCS player, this is, in my opinion, a great piece of kit. Again, I would never say that it's essential, and I'm never going to say it's a game changer, because I don't think there is. I don't know, it's a phrase that's awkward. I wouldn't say it's a game changer. If you haven't got this, it's not like you're not going to enjoy a sim. Put it that way. Am I going to change back to my old joystick? No, although arguably it's 50% the same anyway. Do I think the product as a whole is something that I feel happy and comfortable that I've bought? Yes. And so hopefully, as I say, guys, you can pull something out of that that's going to benefit you. It's too open-ended and too varied for somebody to turn around and legitimately say this is going to change your flight simming, because it's not going to change everybody's, and I think we have to bear that in mind. But I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. If you don't, please don't forget to tick like, share, subscribe. Likewise, please feel free to comment with your thoughts about the video and about Moza and about the stick, etc. That would be much appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.